Kung audio. Magandang tanghali. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles. Ito po ang Luminous. Naku, naano pa ako. We wanted to continue yung live natin from yesterday kasi may mga tanong. Merong iba pa nga china-challenge yung yung sinabi natin. So I'm going to go through some of the questions here. I-share ko lang po muna ito dun sa ating groups. Ayun. And while you're at it, habang nandito din po kayo, don't forget to like and share dun sa inyong in your own pages. Yan. Okay na, I'm just going to go through the questions. Kasi apparently, merong iba na in-interview rin tungkol dito. Tingnan niyo yung Trad Media ha. Tayo yung nag-explain kung ano yung nandun, kung ano yung nag-govern na batas, pero merong mga iba na interview. Gayon pa man, it's a good thing na yung ini-interview nila are certain experts. Pero ganito ha, may mga nagsasabi, dapat daw yung contract should have been written in a language that she could understand. What they are citing in that instance is the FPIC rule. Dun sa FPIC rule, pag binigay yung free, prior, and informed consent under the old, not the new rules, may bago na naman pong batas, may bago na naman pong rules, new rules on the free, prior, and informed consent, nakalagay dun sa FPIC Memorandum of Agreement, kailangan nakalagay yung saad yun sa isang kontrata na nakasulat dun sa wika ng katutubo. Wika o dialekto ng katutubo. Bakit dalawa pa yung ginamit? Kasi wika, karamihan sa ating mga salita dito sa Pilipinas, marami po ang hindi pa rin nakaka-distinguish ng kaibahan ng wika at saka dialekto. So just to run through it very quickly, ang dalawa pong wika, wala pong mutual intelligibility, hindi po magkakaintindihan. So ang mga nagsasalita ng Tagalog ay hindi makakaintindi ng wikang Ilocano. Ang nagsasalita ng Ilocano hindi magkakaintindihan doon sa mga nagsasalita ng Binisaya. Or Hiligaynon, and so on. And so these constitute languages. Sa isang lugar, maaaring maraming dialekto pero isang language. So wag niyo pong iisipin, lalong-lalo na pag binabasa ninyo yung ating batas, sinasabi talaga na, ano tong sinasabi ni Joseph de la Cruz, trigger na naman ako. Ako ba yung na-trigger o may mga na-trigger ako at sinasagot ko yung mga yon? So, ang dialekto po ay variations of a language. Ngayon, ang wikang Filipino po ay hindi siya mother language na doon nanggagaling yung mga dialekto. Kasi ang misconception nanggagaling doon sa maling pagtuturo noong grade school siguro tayo or marami sa atin in our grade schools, ang tinuro ay yung mga wikang Ilocano, Kapampangan, Tagbanwa, Tausug, and so on, ay mga dialekto. Hindi po sila dialekto, mga mga wika po sila. Okay, so necessary na ang kontrata ay ginagawa doon sa wika na naiintindihan ng pumipirma. At requirement po yon doon sa free, prior, and informed consent. Ngayon, doon sa kaso ni Madam, ang tinitingnan din po natin dito ay ang magiging, wala yung aking sharing. Yan. Tinitingnan po natin dito ay yung civil code provisions. Kasi hindi nga wala nga ang free, prior, and informed consent. So may nagsabi sa akin na dapat dyan ang FPIC ay dapat dyan yung kontrata na ginawa para kay Apo Whang Od ay dandun sa wika na sinasalita niya. Hindi po necessarily kasi requirement nga po yan ng FPIC, which is the consent of the entire community. Ngayon, ang nilalaban ng kabila is that yung kontrata na pinasukan niya was between her and itong mga tao ni Nas. So, ang mag-a-apply dyan ay yung civil code provisions. So, dun sa civil code nakalagay, a contract where consent is given through mistake, violence, intimidation, undue influence, or fraud is voidable. So, where the consent is given through mistake in this case, kasi ang sabi ni Apo Whang Od sa kanyang grant niece ay hindi po niya naintindihan So it's by mistake. Pero papansinin din po ninyo, ang pagkalagda ni Whang Od sa kanyang kontrata ay through a thumb mark. What does that mean? It means it is most likely that she is unable to write or unable to read and write. Diba? So the presumption is of illiteracy. So the civil code says when one of the parties is unable to read or if the contract is in a language not understood by him and mistake, in this case, is alleged the person enforcing the contract must show the terms thereof had been fully explained to her. So, hindi po sufficient na in-explain ito ng isang relative niya. Kailangan maipapakita yung full explanation ng supposed relative na yon at maikikilatis ito. So, usually people, pagka ganito, lawyers, advise their clients, kapag ganito, magkaiba yung wika, ay kumukuha ng official na translator. So, like I said, yung dun sa sinabi ko was, kailangan po, in her case, it should have been fully explained to her. Kasi nga, yung paglalagda niya using a thumb mark presumes that she might be illiterate. Okay? Alright, yung ibang mga questions, medyo na ano ko dun sa, yung iba kasi galit pa sa akin parang pinalalabas na kasalanan ko yung Indigenous Peoples Rights Act Ang sabi ng iba, bakit? Well, ano ba? Hindi ba niya pwedeng pagkakitaan yung sarili niyang skill and so on. So, ito na-explain din po ito ni Doc Nestor who says that the heritage of a community is from the shared experience, its common history, its practices, its traditions. No one person owns it. Although the skill is owned by Whang Od, the community owns, let's say, the designs, the history, lahat ito. Sa kanila po yon, and it is mutually shared. It is a communal right. Meron ngang nagagalit na sinasabing, communal rights. Pero we have to understand na iba po yung economic at saka social paradigm ng mga katutubo natin. Kadalasan po sa kanila ay communal talaga ang pangunahing karapatan. Bago yung karapatan ng individual, yung karapatan muna ng nakararami ang iiral. Bago yung individual. Sa ibang communities nga, hindi pa well-developed yung idea of individual rights. Kaya wag po natin ipipresume na mas marunong tayo doon sa mga katutubo. At yan nga po ang sinasabi ng Indigenous Peoples Rights Act. Binibigyan natin sila ng agency. So yung mga tao who feel that they are, how do you call this, more popish than the Pope, mas marunong pa sila kaysa doon sa mga katutubo, are put on notice by the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act. Kaya nga po, binibigyan natin sila ng agency, meaning yung community has the power to direct the course of their own destiny, to determine what for them will be economically beneficial, what for them is beneficial, where is the community going to go. So meron din, nagagalit din at sinasabi na, what is community? Why is it the community that will give its consent? Define community. In this case, the community is, when we refer to community, it is the indigenous cultural community. So, at ano yun, that's actually a term that we use instead of using the larger term which is tribe. Ang tribe po kasi ay, ang equivalent niya is a nation state. So, halimbawa, dun sa US, you have the Cherokee Nation. Yun po ang tribe. So, doon sa tribe po, maaaring may mga communities. So, doon sa Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, we give the right to the community and not to the greater, so to speak, nation or tribe. Okay? Ang basihan po kasi nito ay yung paper ni Dr. Jess Peralta who for the longest time was in charge of the Gawad Manlilikha ng Bayan Awards of the NCCA and he also was formerly with the National Museum. He is an anthropologist but has been responsible for making many of our policies. Kasama din ang mga input nito ni former chairman of the NCCA, Felipe De Leon Jr. So, yung mga, I welcome these reactions kasi itong mga reactions na to, ibig sabihin may pagkakataon tayong i-discuss ito at mas maraming matututunan ang ibang tao tungkol sa ating mga katutubo, mga kababayan na katutubo. So, let me check yung mga ano nyo. yung mga comments ninyo. Magandang araw po sa lahat. In this case po, di ko mabasa yung name eh. Legal po ba na i-continue ni NASA ang kontrata kay Whang Od kahit pirmado na? Actually, dahil dito sa provisions na nakikita nyo dun sa screen, the contract is voidable. So, maaaring ang gawin ni Apo Whang Od through her representative is hindi niya itutuloy yung kontrata. Kung habulin ng kabila, ang defense nila is the contract is void. And they can actually sue to void the contract. Okay? She can actually start acting as though the contract is void. So that's why hindi po siya tumuloy doon sa pagtuturo. Ang sinasabi niya is, ay hindi ko naintindihan kung kaya't pumayag ako kasi hindi ako sure, basta umuoo lang siya. And I think it's possible na medyo napagsamantalahan yung yung friendliness niya at saka willingness niya makipag-usap. Nag-rely din po sila na mayroon siyang kasama na isang kamag-anak doon, pero like I said, dahil ang community po ang nagbibigay ng consent dito, hindi maaaring i-replace ng isang kamag-anak lamang yung free, prior, and informed consent ng community. Does this mean walang agency o walang karapatan si Apo Whang Od to enter into contracts? She can, of course. Pero yung paggamit niya ng indigenous cultural knowledge o yung knowledge systems, bahagi po yun kasi ng kabuuan ng community. Minsan, yung community, deemed na wine-waive nila yung karapatan nila to give the FPIC and allow her by recognizing one of their members to enter into agreements like this pag hindi sila tumutol. Well, in this case, tumutol nga po yung kamag-anak ni Apo Whang Od, and it could become a bigger thing. So may tutol dito. Pag tumutol ng ganon, then it will be the entire community now that could weigh in. Okay. Sabi ni Ophir, given the language barrier and clearly centenarian na po si Apo Whang Od, talagang malabo na ang alam niya yung kontrata. So, hindi ko na babasahin the rest of it. Kaya niyo na yan. Sabi ni My Munchkin, reminds me of the two ITAs na pumirma na lang nung kasunduan ng NUJPD because they were annoyed by the lawyers. That is correct. Pero hindi po ito kasi FPIC contract. That is a contract for representation. Pero dahil katutubo nga ang involved at posibleng magkaiba sila ng wika, nasa burden ngayon ng mga abogado para patunayan na yung engagement agreement nila was properly translated at na-explain doon sa kanilang mga kliyente. Kung hindi yan properly explained and translated, then it is voidable. Maaaring sabihin ng kanilang mga kliyente na, teka muna, we didn't agree to that. Or in their case, pinilit nyo lang naman kami, kaya umuo na kami dahil nakulitan kami. So yes, you're right. But that's not an FPIC contract. Or is it a contract that is voidable because of the lack of an FPIC? If ever the rights of IP are violated, sabi ni Vic, if is violated by foreign entity, saang korte idudulog ang reklamo? Kung dito sa ating korte didinggin, liable ba ang foreigner dito sa batas? Yes, opo. Ang foreigner po, ang batas natin, particularly ang criminal laws, ay territorial in nature. So as long as you are on Philippine territory, you have to obey our laws. Ngayon, in this case, contract law, civil in nature, although posibleng wala itong kulong, I cannot tell yet if there are criminal aspects of this case. What we can see is there is a civil aspect because may kontrata. So dito, yung kontrata, makikita natin, will be subject to Philippine law, among other things, because it was entered into here in the country. So, ang mag-a-apply po talaga ay Philippine law. So, anong court? Well, the court where the contract was signed or entered into. Yun yung general rule, unless there are other elements that would indicate that the action should be in another court. Minsan kasi, ang mga pumapasok sa mga kontrata, ang gagawin nila is sasabihin nila kung anong court ang may jurisdiction. So that becomes part of the agreement. So in the absence of an agreement, then it's usually where the contract is entered into. Yung mga bitter na nagagalit, makinig muna kayo mabuti before kayo magalit. Ang liwanag ng explanation, basta kayo kuda ng kuda. Well, I don't really blame them kasi hindi naman, it's brought about by a lack of understanding. So yung mga tanong nila, although galit, we don't take it personally, pero may alam niyo, we take this as a teaching or a learning opportunity. Maaari nating pag-usapan ito. Kukunti lang kasi yung pagkakataon na pag-usapan natin yung kultura at saka ganito, heritage, di ba pagsamantalahin na rin natin, sagutin na natin yung mga tanong nila. Kasi yung iba talaga angry na I suppose it might be clouding their judgment. Pero ang maliwanag dyan is that people have to learn, all of us, we have to learn that there are laws to protect the katutubo para hindi po sila na-exploit katulad nito, di ba? Ito, sabi naman ni ni Ophir, sabi ng BIR, yung foreign bloggers dapat magbayad ng tax and bawal mag-vlog kasi kumikita while on a tourist visa. For deportation daw sila pag nahuli. Okay. I see that there are defenses there. Kung hindi pa po sila kumikita, but they are right, kapag meron silang activity dito that will bring in income for them, then income taxes have to be paid on that activity. Tapos, in the absence of a permit to do so also, meron pang patong na penalties yun. So, kung ako, wag muna deportation, to hold them for trial because yung hindi kayo sumusunod sa tax laws will become a tax evasion case which is criminal in nature. Ito si Ma'am Inday, can we call to pass a law to persona non grata sinas daily? Just asking, love your LS and karambola, nakakataba ng utak. Yes, ma'am, actually, we can do that. Pero, what is persona non grata? It's really simply a statement that they don't want you there. Does it have criminal implications? Meaning, pag pumasok ka ba dun sa city, trespassing ka? Not necessarily, because you can still use the public places and the private places in which you have a right to be in, like you have been invited and so on. What it only means is that the people there don't really like you and you have to be put on notice that if anything happens to you in that city, people will hesitate, diba, to help you. Not that it wouldn't be a crime, diba, pagka sinagasaan ka tapos hindi ka tinulungan nung nakasagasa sa inyo, it's still going to be a crime. But really, that's the extent of it. Usually, you don't need to pass a law, you just have to pass a resolution. So, maaari yung mga legislators natin could put the time to use and issue a resolution saying that we are no longer welcoming him. And yung immigrations and our DFA can also start refusing to give them visas. Diba? Ito, Brittany says, Nas Daily showed a photo of Whang Od signing the contract with her thumbprint. Can that be used as a good defense for Nas Daily? Like I said, not necessarily. It's only an indication that they entered into an agreement, but is there really an agreement? Unang-una nga, like I said, dun sa ating pinost na provisions ng Civil Code, we can, the use of the thumbprint is usually done by a person who is incapable of writing, and then we can presume that she is illiterate, unable to sign her name. And therefore, mas mabigat yung burden ni Mr. Nas to prove that they had properly explained this to Whang Od. Now, she claims she didn't understand and therefore now, tumataas po yung requirement of evidence nila. The video by itself will not be sufficient. Kasi it only shows that she was signing. And there seems to be a short explanation from a relative, pero hindi tayo sure yung extent ng pag-e-explain ng bawat probisyon at kung ano yung mga obligasyon na pinapasukan ni Apo. Yung iba nagagalit sa'yo, mema lang ang mga yon, sabi ni JB Salvador. Well, okay lang yon. Di muna mag-research about rights and laws for indigenous tribes ng Pilipinas. I think yung iba nabibigla sila because they didn't know that there was such a law. Di ba? Sabi ni Ophir, sana Soljan Kalida can sue on behalf of NCIP if mabagal ang legal service ng NCIP. NCIP is the regulatory agency, so kailangan mauna po sila, umaksyon muna sila. Sila po ang hihingi ng serbisyo ng Soljan kung sakasakaling kinailangan nila ito. Pero dito nakikita natin, alam nyo, yung head ng Cordillera Administrative Region na NCIP is a lawyer. So, allow him muna to make the investigation and the findings of fact. Itong opinion na ini-issue natin are based on the facts that we see that have been publicized. Baka base dun sa investigasyon, may makita naman sila na, might mitigate it either way. Nas Daily and twin brother Project Nightfall are mercenary vloggers who create a feature video for the right price. There's nothing wrong with earning a living from your skill, di ba? There's nothing wrong with that. Pero, in this case, special protected class po kasi ang indigenous peoples natin, so you can't just ask them to give up certain things, to teach and all that without the corresponding obligations. So, ito, sabi ni Ma'am Karen, I've read in one of the comments na tinake down daw post ng niece ni Apo Whang Od at Nas Daily's side said na they will talk it out privately. Ang mga susunod na mga meetings ba nila ay valid kung sakaling patuloy i-exploit pa rin yan sa NAS Academy. Ang important po dito is that the rights of Apo Whang Od are protected because she is considered quite special sa atin, di ba? As one of our most famous mambabatok. But the community might also want a say in it. So in this case, we will see the community can also waive their rights to it if they want to. So titignan po natin. They do have a right to talk it out. Walang problema naman 'yon. Pero dapat pinoprotektahan natin as we keep saying yung karapatan ng community at saka ni Apo Whang Od. Okay? Maraming salamat kay Herd Miles. Leo Mauricio says, tama, galit ang mga iba kasi ignorante sila sa law. Ignorance of the law excuses no one. Kung sila magkakakaso, malamang iiyak mga yan kasi di nila alam. Ignorante kaya mema, gusto maging sikat at maging trending. Ako, I don't mind. Like I said, as long as people are talking about this and learning about it, Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act and the rights of our katutubo and what they have to offer, then it's okay. Diba? Florence says, tatuan na lang daw si Nas ni Apo, yung buong mukha. Grabe, masakit yun, ha? Sabi ni Wutar, watching from Alabang, nung college po ako, sabi ng Rizal professor namin, wala daw kultura na word, instead kalinangan. Your thoughts po? I think that's semantics. But I have to hear the side of your professor. I understand there is a debate similar to that. He might be referring kasi to the more appropriate or locally appropriate term that essentially means culture but might be a little deeper than that. Excuse me. Makain kasi ako kanina ng choknut. Okay. Sabi ni Kosang John X, hello Pule, pag-greet Pule ng happy birthday sa asawa niya na si Jovi Salagan Ogena. Tuwang-tuwa po siya kanina, marinig niya coming from you in greetings sa Karambola. Happy birthday kay Ma'am Jovi Salagan Ogena. Sabi ni JB Salvador, sa napansin ko doon sa NAS Academy, mas, mababa ang price ni Whang Od, which is thousands of tradition and expertise ang isi-share ni Apo kaysa sa mga beauty tips and how to become an influencer. Totoo naman po yan. Ang china-charge is something like 700, 750 pesos per person. Diba? Joselito Patron says, di ba yung mga local government bumili ng mga vaccines para sa kanilang mamamayang lungsod? Teka, naligaw yata tayo. Bakit po ina-accommodate nila yung hindi taga-lungsod nila? Pwede ba silang kasuhan? Hindi ko po. Why is this coming in? O sige, just for now, kasi normally we answer outside of the topic later pa. Pero sige, since nalagay na natin, hindi pa po. Well, some of the, you have to make sure. Kasi yung allocations right now na binibigay ng, na nakukuha ng LGU are still coming from the national government. Wala pa po tayong vaccines na binili na pumasok sa bansa. So right now, it is not an issue. Mark Mendoza says, salamat po sa pag-educate ng mga kapwa nating Pilipino. More power. Dan Ahmed says, there are some other foreigner vloggers here too and they're taking advantage sa mga kinikita nila. Okay lang ba yun sa BIR? Well, it shouldn't be. Like I said, kunwari, nag-live sila dito sa bansa, tapos kumita sila habang nagla-live sila o pinopost nila yung kanilang mga videos, the BIR could take cognizance of that and say that whatever income they earned was generated here and therefore they have to pay taxes here. Brittany says, will removing Whang Od's class from NASA Academy be enough para hindi na sila makasuhan? Well, since what I can see right now is it's primarily a civil case, opo, basta hindi nila ituloy yung pag-exploit. Right now kasi I do not see any damage except yun nga, they violated these rules. Dun sa rules kasi, maaari rin may mga certain acts dun sa Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act that could be criminally punished, but most of them kasi relate to the ancestral domain. Eto, sabi ni Ma'am Joan, Apo don't need NAS for international exposure. Apo and her culture are already recognized internationally, especially in the tattoo industry. Well, yes, I understand that. Although it's not necessarily, her tattoos are not a commercial form, they are a cultural tattoo, meaning it's imbued with the values of the cultural community. Sabi ni Totsi, yung beauty vlogger kumikita ng ₱1,000,000 tapos exploit nila ang talent ni Whang Od. Yes, I understand that's yun yung kinaiinisan natin is that parang ganun na lang yun, pasok kayo tapos papalagda kayo kay Apo. Suddenly, pwede niya nang baskil siya dun sa sa videos ninyo. We don't even know or we don't have any control about how you're going to portray her. 'Di ba? Subject ba sa intellectual property ang paggamit ng art ni Whang Od sa online platform? Baka magamit sa replication o alteration para sa productions nila. Yes, that is exactly the point here, di ba? Yun yung sinasabi natin. That's why the community must weigh in because the community owns the intellectual property. Okay? Sabi ni Belle, I have a tattoo from Whang Od and really you can't go inside their place easily. Someone from the inside will have to invite you and tell them why you're there. There were foreigners who line up. Oo, totoo yun. Minsan ang haba ng pila, hindi sila umaabot, ang layo-layo pa naman. Sabi ni J.R. Tablate Jr., Whang Od official FB page is watching right now. Hi po! Ni Eric pinagkakitaan. Well, I think that they attempted. But like I said, wag naman rin tayong sobrang magalit na dinideprive natin ng agency yung community at si Whang Od. She and the community, they get to decide. Hindi yung basta susubuan siya ng kontrata tapos suddenly nandyan na siya sa nagagawa na siya ng whatever. She is not a performance on demand trained something, di ba? This is not a circus. You don't come in and ask one of our more, our venerated, how do you call this, traditional artists to perform on demand for you. She demands, we want her, hindi siya dapat parang siya parang it just cheapens the whole thing. And if her consent was not fully given, meaning it wasn't free and prior and informed as well, then why should we allow her to, to perform like this? Tapos ang katabi niya sina Catriona Green, all that, and they're teaching things like, beauty tips and all of that. I think she deserves a better venue, a much more dignified venue, considering her place in our society. Maraming salamat kay Nathaniel Quintos. Sabi ni Marian Badillo, it's not only Apo, mga mahihirap ine-exploit ng mga charity vloggers. Yes, I understand na meron din ganon. So isa pa yun, yung raising funds for charity, pag may pumapasok dito, tapos sasabihin, tara, maglipon tayo ng pera para ibigay natin sa ganito. Understand that these are also subject to our tax laws. I'm not happy about that, pero, diba, as long as our laws are there, we have to obey. Kahit na po i-pull out yung lecture, I think they should be held accountable. Well, yung pagpasok nila siguro dun sa ancestral domain ng walang prior permission, those things are subject to a criminal penalty. But let us see, like I said, ang aggrieved party dito is Apo Whang Od and her family. So they get to decide here kung they want to take action, if they want to baon na lang ito sa limot or enter into a different contract. That is up to them. But we are all correct in getting angry at the attempt to exploit her. Can NCIP produce a program that will cater to Apo's intellectual property so she can use her own content even in SOCMED? The NCIP doesn't really do that, although I understand that they're allowed to do projects. It would be better if si Apo Whang Od mismo and her community, they do it on their own. They don't need the help of government unless they want to get a grant from the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Diba? They have they can talk to the head of the subcommittee on cultural communities and traditional arts. Paano po kung si Apo Whang Od mismo mag-authorize ng contract? Pwede ba yun? Since it will become a cause of income. It will depend po kung ano yung terms ng kontrata. Kasi kung ang terms ng kontrata include the use of the intellectual property of the community, then that will require the FPIC of the community. Sabi ni Ophir, malas daw ni Nas at forte ko. Nahiya ako bigla. Well, I think if I hadn't pointed it out, somebody else would have. Ma'am Cheryl Ann says, may malaking halaga at ibig sabihin sa amin ng batok. Hindi basta-basta ito natatatak sa skin, correct? Sa skin mo, kung wala kang magiting na nagawa para sa inyong tribo. That is correct. So again, we'll go back to explaining why we can't just use the cultural property, the intellectual cultural property of our katutubo. Diba? Ganito yun, no? Diba, like I said, kunwari, meron tayo, sometimes the community will allow you to record their wedding chants, ganon. Pero, if you put on a play, and then you perform the wedding chant, and it is out of context, the community can actually have you taken down, can stop your performance because of the lack of appreciation for their cultural property, for their expression. Minsan nakaka-insulto. For example, if you are a Catholic, tapos nakita ninyo that the prayers or something like that were turned into something truly blasphemous, maiinis din kayo. Now, while there are laws to protect free expression and all of that, ganun din po yung laws that protect the expressions of the cultural community and how they can prevent it from being expressed in a manner that is not appropriate for their own community. Kailangan respetuhin natin yung mga practices nila, yung wika nila, yung nililikha nila. So yung mga ganon, ang mga tattoo may significance yan. Yung iba, they don't get a tattoo nang wala sila talagang nagawa. Tapos kinikilatis pa. If you are deserving of that tattoo. Yung ibang communities nga, yung tattoo correlate to certain acts of bravery in combat. So kung magpapalagay ka ng tattoo ng ganon, tatanungin ka, what have you done to deserve that? It's like wearing military medals, hindi ka naman hero. Diba? Naiinis yung community and we must learn to respect that. Is it the same with the tattoos that the Samoan males have? A lot of people who are not Samoan have the same tattoos, just buzuki. Yes, but I'm not sure if they have laws protecting their cultural expressions. We do. So merong isa na nagtanong or nagalit at sinasabi na si Apo Whang Od ang lumikha niyan. Dapat siya yung may say on whether or not magtatato siya o hindi. And I would like to point out that yes, of course, nobody can stop Apo Whang Od from tattooing other people, but the community get a say in whether or not another person gets a tattoo because this is a cultural expression and subject to certain rules in their community. Ito, Iko Cayetano says, puro gusto magkakapera naman si Whang Od. Stop the commercialization of the last mambabatok. Sabi nga ni attorney kanina, it cheapens it. Yeah, well, but we must give her agency, meaning balancing act ito. We protect the community, we protect Apo Whang Od, but at the same time, we cannot deprive them of opportunities if she wants to make a living or she wants to have economic compensation or some kind of compensation for what she does. Ganito kahirap at ka-risky magpabatok kay Apo Whang Od. Bibiyahe ka ng more than 11 hours, sabi ni J.R. Tablate Jr. By land, sa gilid ng bundok, bangil landslide, then mag-hike ka pagdating mo sa tribe. If ayaw ni Apo magbatok, sorry. If ayaw ka batukan ni Apo dahil aura mo, then sorry. If yung symbol na napili doesn't fit you, or the day or your aura, sorry, di ibabatok sa'yo. O, there you go. Diba? Yes, I understand that's true. Marvin Rivera says, ang alam ko, nagkaroon na din dati ng exploitation kay Apo, local tattoo convention yata yon. Yes, and that's why we must always learn to act very quickly to protect our local artists, our traditional artists. Sabi ni Gretchen, parang earn your stripes, ganun sa Ifugao. Yes. Your tattoo defines how brave you are and what you have done to receive those marks. Ay, nako. O nga ewan ko ngayon kung meron pang mga pintados, yung mga pintados, nako, they'll strike you down. Good afternoon, si Bernadette Diaz is watching from Negros Oriental. Marilyn Hamasaki is watching from Japan. Merong lalaki na nakita ko noon na pabalik-balik siya kay Whang Od and he begs her to give him full warrior tattoo pero ayaw ni Whang Od. Kaya di ako agad naniwala na agad-agad she'll teach what she knows. I agree. Diba? Kaya nga, we always have to be on guard for it. Polly says, been there in Buscalan twice already and have been tattooed by Apo Whang Od. Pag nakabalik uli ako doon, dalhan kita ng Buscalan coffee. Super sarap siya, promise. Ay, salamat po. Di ba? Albert Malona says, big thanks for clarifying issues surrounding Apo Whang Od's situation as a member of the Indigenous community. Yes, but this is not the only Indigenous community, ha? There are others, and they welcome the attention as well. Huwag lang yung exploitation, ba? As a member of the Indigenous, cultural community, I for one believe she was exploited. Yun, hindi ko nabasa yung part na yan. All right. Watching from Bagna. Oy, pinsan ba kita? Taga dyan yung father ko. Sa Bagna, Malolos, Bulacan. Mabuhay po kayo dyan. Ito, in some areas sa Mountain Province, you can't enter without passing through their tribal chief and do some rituals. Yes. I know that for a fact. So, one of the how do you call this? Mumbakis in Ifugao was a friend of mine, and he has since died, but he was instrumental in the NCCA had been able to document yung parang how do you call this? Yung parang initiation rites of several Mumbaki who have inherited the tradition. That was one of my special concerns as subcommission head, as commissioner in the NCCA before for cultural heritage. So, we have to remember na living cultural heritage din po ang ating mga katutubo. And they're entitled to our protection, encouragement, and their own agency to determine the course of where they will go and what their future is going to be. Yun, any chance po, sabi ni Hoven Ong, na sila po ang mag-file ng cases dahil sa pagbagsak ng followers nila and influence as a basis. Ganito po yon. Let them try. And let's see. Diba? Mabuhay ka watching from Doha, si Von Vinerlingat. Shout out to my wife, Alma Lingat. Hi, Alma. Alright. Uy, parang parang konti lang yung mga tanong ninyo ngayon. Eto, Sherlan says, kaya kailangan ng consent ng tribo dahil yung pagbabatok tradition na naipasa sa kanununuan namin. Very good, yes. And this belongs to you. Diba? Yung community have to have a say on, diba? Kasi kayo lang yung dapat natatatuan. Yun yung rule. Kung meron tatatuan na tagalabas, kailangan may rules na susundan si Apo Whang Od. Pag hindi siya sumunod dun sa sariling rules o practices ng community, pati yung community mababagabag sa kanya. So that's how it works. Okay, Yorme and Manny, dalin dyan, tapos batukan little. Uy, kayo naman. I hope that if any of them become our future leaders, then dapat na-appreciate nila yung katutubo natin. Ito sa Bukidnon, sabi ni Darnie, certain rituals must be done before an event can be celebrated or a person can enter some indigenous communities. Mabuhay ka. Opo, that's why galit na galit tayo dun sa mga NPA kasi pinapasok nila yung mga communities na ito and then they convert to communism. Sasabihin, pinabayaan kayo ng gobyerno, andito kami para tulungan kayo, bibigyan namin kayo ng edukasyon. Yung iba may false promises pa na sasabihin na pwede kayong mag-college pagkatapos niyong gumraduate sa mga schools namin and then later on they find out na hindi pwede at uulitin nila halos lahat. So may mga ganun and we should be very, very angry lalong-lalo na dun sa mga mapagsamantalang mga NPA. Bobby Kabading says, magandang hapon, nakikinig lang po ako sa inyo. Ang galing niyo po kasi magpaliwanag. Ay, salamat po. Ito. Sabi ni Gia, Erica, working before sa geothermal exploration company and before we enter into an area where may IPs, we need to get a lot of permits bago nila kami i-allow to enter. Yes, I agree with that. Brian Miranda says, Nas Daily is promoting anger towards Filipinos. I'd really like to have a tattoo from Apo Whang Od. Again, like I said, it will be Apo who will determine if you can have a tattoo. Hello, pwede po bang kasuhan si Nas sa mga bypass na ginawa niya? Salamat, watching from KSA. I think there's an argument can be made for a criminal case. I'm just not sure if he can be convicted. But definitely the contract can be voided. Magpapasalamat lang, sabi ni Ma'am Nenita Bautista, kasi halos na itanong namin sila at ang iba na explain mo na kahapon pa. Salamat po at marami sa libreng classroom mo. Marami talagang natututunan. Hindi po libre ito, kailangan mag-like and follow. At saka share pala. Sabi ni Alex, ibig po sabihin, yung may say yung community sa pagtatato ni Apo, bago po siya magtato sa mga pupunta sa kanya, kailangan ipaalam niya sa community nila. Hindi po, ganito po kasi yun. Okay, ulitin natin. The community can waive the FPIC and say, Apo, kayo nang bahala dyan. Okay, so kasi yung pagtatato niya are subject to certain rules of the community already. So siya yung nag-i-impose nun. Gaya ng sinabi earlier, posibleng may dumating na dayuhan at sabihin niya, hindi ka pwedeng tatuhan. That's it. That is the enforcement of the rules of the community. Okay? Ngayon, when you're dealing with somebody and part of that contract is yung kino-contract mo ay expressions belonging to the entire community such as but not limited to the designs of those tattoos, the indigenous knowledge system involved in tattooing, yes, then she has to seek the very specific approval of the community. Why? Because this belongs to the traditions of the community as well. So most of the time, the community waves in favor of Apo Whang Od. She knows what the rules are for the community itself, and she's left to, you know, to determine who gets a tattoo, who doesn't, who gets to, and all that. Okay? And including the designs. Pero iba po yung wini-wave para sa kanya because she gets to determine who gets a tattoo. Iba po yung pagtuturo at pagdo-document ng practice na yon. That needs a very specific approval from the community. Nakahabol daw ng live si Frank. Thank you for sharing your intelligence and educating us. Subscriber from the United Kingdom. Okay. So ulitin lang po natin, hindi po, there is nothing in the law that deprives any member of the community, hindi po dinideprive ang kahit sinong miyembro ng community ng kanilang tinatawag na agency, which means their ability to enter into contracts, to exercise their rights and all that. But the transactions involving cultural property, particularly the intellectual property of the community, is subject to FPIC of the community. It's just because, for instance, some communities, they waive it or they don't enforce it doesn't mean that that you can stop seeking it. So halimbawa, nakikita nyo na may mga sayaw ng isang community na pino-perform ng iba-ibang mga schools, hindi siya nako-call out, may mga performances in some venues, hindi nagrereklamo yung community. And then suddenly, a community says, wait, itigil nyo yan, huwag kayong ganyan, you cannot do that, that is not the dance, medyo dinagdagan ninyo, that is not the song, kung ano-anong lyrics ang pinasok ninyo. Hindi po yan ang kasuotan namin at wala po kayong karapatan to perform that right. You can actually be stopped from doing that. Pwede kayong mapigilan ng community na yon kasi yung ginagamit ninyo ay intellectual property nila. At yung intellectual na yon, dun sa ibang mga tanong, halimbawa, that say that the contract should be in the language of the katutubo, in this case, yun po ay prescription para dun sa FPIC Memorandum of Agreement between the community and the person seeking to use the intellectual property. Dun sa common contracts where you're simply contracting with a single person, hindi po required yon. Pero kung illiterate yung kakontrata, mabigat yung kailangan na isumitin mo na ebidensya that this had been properly explained to her in a language that she understands. Okay. Ano pa ba yung mga dapat i-recap natin? Even entering ancestral domains usually requires prior permission from the cultural community. If they have given it, and if there is if they have given it, then yes, that is the empowerment of the community. Okay, that is the empowerment of the indigenous cultural community. And while they usually thank us for defending their rights, wag rin po tayong atribida defending a right that they had not sought to defend. Okay? So, yung mga nagagalit because parang hindi daw pinapayagan si Apo Whang Od to contract her services out, that is not true. Because Apo Whang Od has agency and she's allowed, in fact, to determine who gets even near her, who gets a tattoo, and so on. What needs to be sought is the approval of the community or the consent of the community for the use of the communal intellectual property. So, how about yung mga nagrarally na ginagamit ang mga IPs natin, nalalabag ba nila ang culture? Well, hindi po culture na nalalabag, yung karapatan ng katutubo kung nandun sila against their free will, di ba? Kidnapping na yun. Pero yung paggamit sa kanila o pananamantala sa kanila, pananamantala na niloloko sila and all that, meron pong mga, nakalimutan ko na, may mga laws po against that, yung taking advantage. And in fact, may mga estafa pa yon and so on that you can actually prove. So, yeah, yung paggamit nga, yung pananamantala ng NPA sa kanila na sinasama sila sa rebellion, hindi po tapos hindi pala buo yung consent, either natatakot sila and all that, hindi po makakasuhan yung katutubo pagka tinakot lang sila para magawa nila yung mga karahasan na inuutos ng NPA. Pero bibigat po yung kaso ng mga terorista. Sabi ni Ma'am Sambuanga Hermosa Files, parang si Ma'am yun lang na bash dahil ginamit katutubong design para sa patay pala. Di ba we called her out? We even showed yung dalawang designs. One of them came from the National Museum and what she was wearing. But to be fair to her, she had the consent of the community. I don't know if yung ginagamit niya yung para sa patay. Thank you sa pagbibigay ninyo ng mga tamang impormasyon sa mga batas. Madami po kaming natututunan sa inyo sa pag-live. Sana mag-shoutout naman po dito po kami sa Bagong Bantay, Quezon. Hi po sa mga taga Bagong Bantay, Quezon. Ma'am Coralie says, watching again in Wisconsin, USA, while at work, it's 2:52 a.m. here. Wow! Maraming salamat, Ma'am Coralie, for your super chat. Abu Erhel says, konti lang yung mga tanong kasi naiintindihan ng mabuti yung explanation nyo. Okay. Really what we need is this kind of conversation, sabi ni Tope. IP law needs pa po to be discussed. Okay, pero kasi a lot of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act pertain to the ancestral domain and ancestral lands. Pero ang madalas na papag-usapan yan, and there's a very active practice of some people who either protect or seek to use the ancestral domain. Ang bihira po mapag-usapan talaga itong kultura, including yung history at saka how we should be very, very protective of our IPs. At ako, natutuwa naman ako na nagkaroon tayo ng ganitong klaseng pagkakataon. Although, sana not at the expense of Apo Whang Od. Tinatanong ni Eminus Lipus, national artist po ba si Apo Whang Od? Hindi po. The closest that she can be declared is National Living Treasure, Gawad Manlilikha ng Bayan awardee. I'm not sure if she has been nominated for that. So yung mga Dreamweavers po na sa South Cotabato, if I'm not mistaken, dun sa have been recognized. Meron din silang Gawad Manlilikha ng Bayan awardee for their weaving. So marami po tayong mga ganon na declared. So siguro that's another thing that we should also talk about. Apo Whang Od is one of the most famous of our traditional craftsmen. Pero meron tayong mga awardees who have reached the pinnacle of their artistry and they are celebrated as national living treasures. Yung mga Gawad Manlilikha ng Bayan awardees. So we feature natin yan sa Luminous one of these days. Sabi ni Ma'am Babes, kaya nga yung mga pinapalabas sa National Geographic Channel, may acknowledgement parate bukod sa nagbayad sila gaya sa embalmer at paano ang pagmami sa Egypt. Opo. Thanks a lot sa magandang paliwanag ninyo. Marami kaming natututunan. So ako, I don't really want anybody na mang-aaway tayo kapag hindi nila naiintindihan yung cultural property, yung communal intellectual property, o yung pangangailangan natin na protektahan ang mga IPs. But if we can be patient with people in explaining to them na ganito nga po yun, lalong-lalo na kung miyembro kayo ng Indigenous Cultural Community, pagkakataon niyo po ito na mag-post at i-explain at saka sabihin niyo rin yung heritage niyo, what you used to do, what your practices are, kasi malaki po, this is the kind of conversation, tama po kayo, this is the kind of conversation that we should be having. Yung pinag-uusapan natin, natututunan natin yung kultura ng ating mga katutubo, because ang Pilipinas po is a multicultural country. Ibig sabihin, napakayaman natin, iba-ibang klaseng expressions ang nandito, may mga histories ng iba't ibang nating mga katutubo na mahalaga na aralin natin. And also remember this, there is also this concept that we are all indigenous. Kinikilala lang po natin yung mga communities whose expressions are so different from the mainstream and so essential for us to recognize. Also understand na magkaiba po tayo ng paradigm, and that's one of the reasons we talk about them and learn about them, because they have memories, they have heritage, and they have mindsets that we might not still understand. They don't live in our world. If you'll understand that, yeah, they are different. Yes, and we are related to them also. Yes, and they're mahalaga po na alamin natin yung sa kanila. There is one community, halimbawa, I understand it is the Tagbanwa of Palawan, who are taught that every time they take something from nature, they must also give back. So hindi ba yan pagtuturo ng ecological conservation, na hindi na tayo pwedeng manirahan sa isang mundo na linear yung ating production. We take from the natural resource, we convert it, use it, consume it, and then the what's left of it is thrown away. Hindi po sustainable yan, and we will be killing ourselves in the future. The katutubo hold the key to how to live, actually, and how to run this world. And even if kumukonti sila, and dahil kumukonti po sila, mas nagiging mahalaga sila. And there will come a time when we will have to go back to the way that they lived, because it is the right and sustainable way. And that is why, diba, it is important for them to retain their knowledge systems. So, maraming salamat sa lahat na nag-participate. Sige, one more. Mabuhay po kayo, sabi ni Acuna Celestino, you're a good teacher. Sabi ni JB, the NCCA conferred on Whang Od the prestigious Dangal ng Haraya Award at Tabuk, the capital of Whang Od's ethnic province of Kalinga in 2018. Yes, we were involved in that po, in an indirect way. Bakit po? The Dangal ng Haraya Award is an NCCA award. It isn't at the level of a national award, similar. Well, it is a national award, but hindi siya yung katulad ng ng National Living Treasures or National Artists. Magkapareho po sila. Ang National Artist po, pag pumasok sa kwarto, kahit presidente kailangan tumayo. So parang parang Medal of Valor po yung mga yan. Although kinilala na po ang artistry at saka yung value ni Apo Whang Od ng ating National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Okay. Meron bang nag-aaway dito sa Wag po kayong mag-aaway. Ito. Brittany says, do travel shows and documentaries that feature indigenous communities need permit or have a contract prior to filming? They should, yes. The practices that are being shown or verbal agreement lang po acceptable na. Pag challenge po kayo and you're using only a verbal agreement, then how are you going to prove it? Diba? The burden of proof is on you. Sabi ni Floren, kung kailangan ni Apo ng abogado, pwedeng kayo. Yes, pero the case will be where they are sa Kalinga. So, malamang yan sa Tabuk. Ang layo. It would be better if she gets a lawyer from her area. Sabi ni Legendary, bawal mag-away dito. Or if there is an issue, you call my attention to it. And lastly, sa lahat po ng katutubo, pag kailangan nila ng legal help, saan po pinakamalapit na pwede nilang puntahan? Nearest city hall or lugar nila? Normally, I would advise the public attorney's office, which is they usually have an office wherever there is a court, or dun sa IBP, they have a free legal aid society, so you just need to look for the nearest IBP. Also, usually have their offices near wherever there is a court. So ito yung mga libre po. If there is a free legal aid society in the area, then yes, they can ask for their help there. Sometimes, if the issue doesn't involve the NCIP, pwede rin po kayong humingi ng tulong or at least ng direktiba sa ating NCIP. Okay? Cyclops says, matatawag ba yung community ni na Apo Whang na parang endangered species? Uy, tao yung mga yan, ha? But the practices ganito po yun, ang kultura po, hindi yan steady lang, as in hindi nagbabago. So yung iba kasi gusto nila, pagka nakakita ng katutubo, gusto nila meron pang kasuotan. Pero tandaan po ninyo, nagbabago yung kasuotan habang nagbabago din yung panahon. At minsan, yung mga katutubo natin, ang bihis nila ay katulad na rin natin. Nakamaong na rin sila, t-shirt, ganyan. Oh, and for ceremonial purposes, meron din silang kasuotan. Na, please don't call them costumes, okay? Kasi costumes you wear when you're trying to be somebody you're not, except in beauty contests. Okay? Okay? Now, sa kanila po, hindi yan costume kasi it expresses who they are. So, kasuotan. Minsan, ang paggamit na lang ng kasuotan ay dun sa mga formal na okasyon, dun sa mga rituales nila, or sa mga mahahalagang okasyon para sa kanila. So, weddings and all that. Ah, so yung mga iba kasi pag pupunta sila dun sa lugar ng mga katutubo, gusto nila nagbibihis pa and all that. That's not fair. You don't ask them to perform for you or to dress in a certain way for you. This is not a theme park. Yung ancestral domain po ay hindi theme park yan na ini-expect ninyo. Unless talagang bahagi ng pang-araw-araw na kasuotan nila, hindi po maganda yung nag-expect tayo ng ganon. We have to understand that people change and cultures change. Tayo, nagbabago tayo. Di ba, nagbabago din yung style. So, ganun din po sa ating mga katutubo. Yung minsan, mas mabagal magbago ay yung mga paniniwala nila. So, even yung participation nila dito sa mainstream economy natin, sometimes they're hesitant to do so or sometimes are not very good at it. Kasi hindi nga nila paradigm yan, yung ating, yung sa atin. So, yung iba naman, sanay na sila. But they're very proud at keeping their traditions and we don't need to protect them anymore in some instances, but we do still help them protect their expressions. Okay? And on that note, ayan na sabi ni Chai, we used to have Travel Time by Susan Calo Medina. We should have the same program again. Yeah, I think we should. That was produced by the NCCA. Teddy Boy should call out the embassy ambassador of Nas Daily, sabi ni Ophir. Yep. Uy, maraming salamat kay Leo Asino for the super sticker. Okay, so on that note, may Sutil Saturday pa naman din tayo. Just put in the comments below what you want to discuss. Yung iba dito, medyo nanggigigil na bumalik sa usapang politika, and we can do that. We can do that tomorrow. So till Saturday tomorrow, probably in the evening para yung ibang mga natin, mga OFWs natin, makakalahok uli. So probably tomorrow at 10 p.m. ang ating Sutil Saturday para we can pass the ECQ time without going crazy. Maraming salamat. Out of topic, si Jimmy is asking about anti-endo law. Na-veto po ba ito? I understand that the anti-endo law that they had passed did not pass the standards required by the president. We can discuss that some future time. Mahaba-haba kasing aralin yan eh. And I need like several days to study that. Parang yung sa kuryente, it's taking me months to study it kasi ang gulo-gulo. So, okay, maraming salamat. Sabi ni JB, bukas sana yung issue ni Manny. Pinaiimbestigahan daw kayo ni Attorney Ahmed. Naku, JB, hindi ka nakinig dun sa live namin. Ay, sa sa tambayan. Nasa tambayan po lahat ng sagot namin at saka may mga posts kami tungkol doon. So, para dun sa mga interesado, you just scroll down dun sa Luminous, nandun po yung sagot namin. And bukas, kung mahihikayat ko sina Attorney Ahmed at si JP, sige, pag-usapan uli po natin yan. Maraming salamat sa pagsubaybay sa Luminous Live ngayong araw na ito. Maraming salamat sa super stickers. Maraming salamat sa super chat. And even more so, maraming salamat sa mga katanungan at yung ibang mga facts na binibigay niyo sa amin. Special greeting sa lahat po ng mga miyembro ng iba't ibang cultural communities na nanonood ngayon. Mabuhay po kayo. Huwag niyo sana pong papabayaan ang inyong cultural heritage. At alamin sana yung inyong kasaysayan kasi natutuwa kami po pag pinag-uusapan ninyo. Huwag po kayong mahihiya magkwento ng inyong mga kasama sa community. Maraming salamat. Have a good day have a good day everybody and have a good weekend. Please, please, please stay safe, mask, social distancing, pagpabakuna yung mga kaya na magpabakuna and all that. And stay well everybody.